meeting to order. It is 2:31 p.m. on this Thursday, April 11, 2013 meeting of the AMATS Technical Advisory Committee. Roll call.
Okay.
Mr. Carr.
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Rebuffo.
Present.
Mr. Weaver.
Here.
Mr. Martin.
Here.
Mr. Wilbur.
Here.
Mr. Post is sitting in for Ms. Witt.
Here.
Ms. Formillo is here. Ms. Howe. Here. Mr. Morris and Ms. Epstein are not with us at this time, but we do have quorum. Craig, do you mind making the public involved in the process?
Yes, all AMATS meetings are public meetings. The public is invited to comment on any items that we have before us. If we have a business item, we'll have a presentation by staff, and then the committee will be given a chance to discuss it, and then at that point, any member of the public is welcome to comment.
Thank you. All right, first up is the approval of the agenda.
Second?
Moved by Ms. Heil, seconded by Mr. Carr. Are there any opposed to approval of the agenda? Hearing none. So, no minutes this time? Alright, so first up is our business items. Wow, that was fast. Item 5A, the AMATS policies and procedures amendment.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is the P&P that we're working on related to transportation modeling and standardized socioeconomic data. I didn't hear from Mr. Morris on whether or not he was going to be here today, but he was one of the driving forces behind this. I'm just wondering if it makes sense to wait on this a little bit. I don't know if folks will want to. I honestly, it's been so long since we took this up, I don't remember what the issues were, but I do know that this is the latest version. In other words, it has been changed since the last time we looked at it, so. I don't know, Teresa, do you remember what the changes were?
It was to basically add information on the website, and primarily the purpose of this policy is to standardize and make modeling information consistent to our partners, to Kavada, to other interested folks. And then if they have more updated information, they can bring it to us and we can go, okay, we accept it, we don't, and have the validity behind it. So there were a couple of small changes on page 2 of your handout. We added number 3, AMATS shall make all reasonable efforts to make all the data available resources. The reference to privacy has to do with the Department of Labor. We cannot show any information regarding employees. So we get that information from them. So we have a memorandum of agreement. So we have to be very careful with that confidentiality of that
Chris, are you with us?
data.
I'll put you on.
And then also on B, we had some information on model application checklist that we would provide consultants. And I'm basing that off of Virginia DOT has a great website and checklist that we provided to you earlier. And then just make sure that whatever that someone presents to us, they follow FHWA guidelines and mandates, because we are required to follow not only CFR 23, but 40, 49, and the Clean Air Act. So we just need to make sure that they do that. And then on B, we'd initially put a time frame of a certain amount of time that the TAC would take a look at it. And we just, based on your recommendation, just change that to the TAC will make that determination on whether to accept the proposed amendments. And that's really about all the changes that we made based on the October work session.
Did this get released for public comment?
No.
Oh, a good follow-up question. Will it need to be?
I guess I would respond by saying it's something that we're creating out of whole cloth, so I don't think there's anything that requires us to do it, but I think it's a really good idea. You know, the policies and procedures are certainly not written into federal regs, so these are things that we do for how we operate, and it's a really good idea to release it, so. great rush to adopt it right away, so I don't see there's any problem waiting another however many days folks want to release it for.
Any good questions, comments?
Yeah, I was just reading over it, and notwithstanding some of the activities happening in Juneau about Cabada, we're forgetting Kenai Borough. We have major transportation hubs that come out of Kenai Borough who may be interested in regional transportation modeling as well. So maybe we can change the specific references to something more similar to anyone interested in regional transportation modeling. So, just some thoughts. And I agree with, I think it ought to go out to public.
Yeah. I apologize for coming in late. I did run this by a transportation consultant we've worked with in the past, and he had some very interesting thoughts and had some examples of how data were presented by other metropolitan planning organizations around the country, in particular referred me to the San Francisco one, and I do have one-page copy for folks, but it's a way of making the information available and transparent and ongoing feedback from people as things change on the AMATS website. And I thought he had some good ideas. I'm probably not the best person to present all those ideas, but if we're going to send it out to public comment, that could be incorporated or presented to the TAC in the future. So I would support sending it out to public comment.
Madam Chair, I would suggest, since this is going to be an AMATS policy, it's a policy document, I would suggest that this committee is suggesting that it go out to public review and make a recommendation to the policy committee that it be released, because we do not establish policy, and we should be drafting policy from a technical committee level, at least without their concurrence that it's available to go out. But like Mr. Carr, Ms. Heil, I don't have any objections to going out, but we should not be the ones letting it go.
So we'd have to move it to the policy committee with a recommendation for them to release it.
That would be my suggestion.
It was tasked to us to do this, but now we've got their work coming back to them, and they can decide what they want to do.
Any other questions? Comments? At this time, we're open to the public. If you have any questions or comments on this item, please state your name for the record prior to.
Hand out my one page so that people have that.
Sure.
Just, Madam Chair, before we get too far along, I just want to introduce a new old face in the crowd that folks may not understand or know exactly what's occurring in this young gentleman's life. But John Spring, since he left our employ, has done many, many different things, but now he has accepted an appointment to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And at their last meeting, they appointed him as the AMATS rep. So he wasn't at that meeting.
I deserve to be appointed because I was absent with no excuse and watching a basketball game, so I get what I deserve.
Hey, there are more important things in life.
So,
Thank you.
When you're not there. Okay.
So I don't know, John, if you had any thoughts. You may have just seen this modeling creature here for the first time, but.
Yeah, I just read it over, and I guess I was familiar with it when we went through the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, and that this issue came up, and I think it's a really good, very, very good policy. The only thing I might suggest for addition would be the issue regarding regional forecast. It's always been the policy of AMATS since I was working there back in the early 90s, or middle 90s, what was it, I forget, but way back then. We established a policy, informal policy, that we would use the ICER forecast. And I don't know if that's something that we want to incorporate into this, because that was also controversy with Cabada, as I remember, using a different forecast, regional forecast, and for consistency's sake, or maybe that would be helpful to give guidance for future staff that when they update it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from public? All right. The item is back with the committee then.
Well,
Is there
move
any
to
more-
approve this draft AMATS policy procedure number 6 be recommended to the policy committee for release for public comment.
Second?
Moved by Ms. Howe, second by Mr. Park. Is there any discussion?
Yes. Quick clarification, 30-day public comment?
Members that are public involved.
Usually you think 30 days.
Mr. Post?
One question about, I guess, how this works. At the bottom of this page, first page, it says, the report shall provide household employment projections, a summary allocation that's not exceeding 10 years from the base year, and then it says the year that the transportation model was last validated. And usually, I mean, I think that the last time the transportation model was validated is at least a year or so ago. And you are going to need to develop another model when you do the next MTP. So when you next do the next MTP a couple years from now, 2016, you're looking maybe at a 2026 mid-year horizon. But if the interval cannot exceed 10 years from the last time it was validated, theoretically you need an interval no further out than, say, 2022. I mean, it seems like you're creating, you might need to go ahead and create an extra household projection.
I could interpret. I think David's right. The point is that when you're making projections to the out year, you shouldn't make an interview. You may have to do more than one in a 10-year period because of when your base year is set. And that would be okay. It's a lot of extra work, but it does two things. One, it makes sure that we at AMATS keep our model current based on the information that we have. And then if someone else wants to use this model, they're going to be using the same base year we're using, and they're going to use the same projection year we're using, and the same horizon year we're using, if they want to use the model for projects. So that's, I think, the intent of the consistency. But does that make sense?
With your question is that if you're.
Well, I guess I'm wondering, and maybe I'm misinterpreting how this is to be applied, kind of looking at this for the first time here. But if we're in need of then updating this model, and I guess I'm not sure that that's how this is applied, and the last time the model was validated would have been 2011, then you'd need a projection that was no further out than 2021. But at your next MTP, you're going to be needing sort of the mid-MTP timeframe, a 2026 horizon there. And so I'm just wondering if in having this language that you're creating an extra step for the modeling process. And I guess I just throw that question out there to the folks that are more recently involved in the modeling. If that's a valid concern, or if that this doesn't really apply to them.
I think what we were trying to do is to show consistency within how a consultant would take a look at this, and that in those intervening years, we would extrapolate it out for, I think this was mainly for air quality piece, if I recall. And John may be able to add something into that when we were drafting this. And usually that's what we do. We take a look at the period from ISER and we just extrapolate those intervening years out if we're missing that portion. And so I don't know if that's what you're getting to.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is when you guys hopefully are updating the next MTP, and I think then you'd have to do the model You'd have to have a validated model. The model might be validated, say, for the year 2016. And you have to do, I think, a 10-year modeling run, which you go out to get out to 2026, and then a 20-year modeling run, which you take out to 2036 timeframe. But the last MTP updated in 2011, 2012. You're looking at, 2026 being more than 10 years beyond that validated time period. I don't know if this pertains to that or not. It sounds like that's not how it's intended to be applied. It's intended to be applied to consultants and others for the air quality modeling and the intermediate
That was
timeframe.
my understanding.
Okay.
I apologize, I wasn't, when this was being drafted, I was out on disability with my back, so I had some input to it, but this is probably one piece I didn't have as much input. It was my understanding that we were mainly looking at the air quality conformity in this piece, but I could be wrong.
Steve drafted that.
Yeah, because the next sentence says report shall include the methodology to be used for calculating household income forecast for intervening year. So.
Okay, well, I defer to others. It's not an issue.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? We had a motion that was moved. Seconded. All right, are there any opposed motions of recommending to the policy committee that they release this to the public for 30 days? Right? All right. No opposed, we are so moved. Just to item 5B, the AMATS operating agreement for advisory committees.
I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but basically, this is the suggestion that we have a air quality seat on our TAC right now, and due to moving to a limited maintenance area, the suggestion was we rotate that seat among the other two advisory committee members, or committees that we have. It came up a couple of times, there was a lot of discussion. The first time it came up, Ms. Epstein was not there, so we tabled it for the following committee meeting, and then the one after that, Ms. Heil was not there, and so we tabled it to the following meeting, and thus this is the following meeting. So it's basically back up to before, in the same manner it was before.
And you did get comments.
I did, at the request of the TAC, I did send out notices to every member of all of the advisory committee, the air quality committee, the bike and ped committee, and the freight committee. I think, if I remember correctly, all of the responses I got suggested adding 2 additional seats to this TAC as opposed to rotating the seats. So, that was, as far as I remember, the responses I got. I probably got half a dozen responses that day, give or take.
Discussion. Ms. Epstein?
So I had a number of discussions with folks on the Air Quality Advisory Committee, including the chair, and so just to add to Craig's summary, the chair of the committee supported the idea of adding the seats. I think it was the whole non-motorized bike ped committee supported the idea. So it was pretty widely supported in the freight committee. Aids Thompson.
Who is the chair also.
Okay. And then the other thing I wanted to add is that when I became a member, it really takes a long time to understand the process of this committee and to figure out when the best way to provide input is and how to do that. And I would suggest respectfully that a year is just about the amount of time before you become a productive member. And so having it rotate on a yearly basis, I don't think is actually helpful. And then my last comment about this and why I do support adding the seats, and I did check with some other MPOs which are much larger than ours. The size we have now shouldn't be an impediment. But, it would be an opportunity to get more buy-in from different perspectives in Anchorage on these issues. And I think that would be helpful. Someone actually suggested to me that adding the Federation of Community Councils would be another way to get additional buy-in and input and that sort of thing about what goes on here. That's another thing we could potentially consider as well. Ms. Sarah?
Yeah, well, this is my idea, and we want to make it a huge, big issue, but I'm not in favor of adding more people to the committee. There's so many times, we have several times a year that we almost don't make a quorum of 6. And this is with everybody who would pay usually be on this committee and have to do our work to be here. So adding more volunteers to this is just going to make it much harder to get a quorum. Upon further reflection, I also think that these 3 committees are very focused committees. They have a very specific task. They're either air quality or your freight or your bicycle, bike and ped. And yes, you can look at bigger issues and whatnot, but that's their focus. That's what their expertise is supposed to be in. And that's what that's their kind of their mission on what they're doing. So in light of that, I was trying to think, the idea of the federation, but the one that could really help us, I think, if we were to make a change to this operating agreement, would to put our formal Citizens Air Quality Advisory Committee member as a member, our 11th member. And I didn't know that John made that on the P&Z, but the thought being is P&Z, who's acting in that capacity right now, has a much broader scope. They look at everything. There are formal committees in our public involvement program. They have the land use component on it, and it could also help us in when we have timing issues coming through or big items coming through the committee, that they will have the experience, the knowledge coming into it, and maybe be able to help things get onto agendas and help get items through P&Z. So my thought is either, I do think, at least from an air quality perspective, with us now in a limited maintenance plan, that and that our air quality is doing fairly well. We haven't had any exceedances in our air quality monitors. That it is time to do a little bit of a change. I do think these 3 committees that are listed right now are too focused for what we need. I do not agree at all that we need additional members. I think we have enough hard of a time getting quorums sometimes, and that if so, I would be entertaining a motion later, or I'll make a motion later after we get done discussing this, to put in the AMATS Citizens Advisory Committee representative as the 11th person on this committee. I fill that out for everybody.
I think I arrived at the same conclusion that Cindy did. I'm not sure. I have to wait till I hear her motion. But, certainly we created these advisory committees to give us advice. They are focused. And I don't think that we have been the least bit reluctant to have them come forward and give us the benefit of their wisdom, if you want. I particularly like the idea of having the P&Z representative. That's the Citizens Advisory.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. On the committee as well. I think that's a wise move. I go back. I think you can create a committee that's way too big. And if there was a perception that we were not listening to these people, I would say, maybe they might have a stronger argument to say we really need to be represented. But, all 3 of these committees are very active. They certainly come forward whenever the time is necessary, and we certainly listen to them. So I think I would entertain Ms. Howell's motion when the time comes.
Jerry, what do you think about having someone from planning and zoning sit on that committee, whoever that might be? You
think
meet
it
with
has
them
its-
monthly, as a director, and then you interact with them twice a month on planning issues and site development issues. Do you think it would be
I think
value?
it has
or-
its pros and cons. And, you know, every body has its different expertise and people that serve on those boards and commissions. Fortunately, John has tremendous expertise. It would be certainly helpful, but all commissioners aren't created equal either. That, I think we're in a unique situation today. Just not sure that it will carry forward in future years. I think John certainly can contribute tremendously.
I thought of that idea without knowing that he was on it. I had no clue until he announced it earlier.
I personally, I think it would, we have good commissioners. There are, you know, good commissioners that are on the commission today, and I think that there have been in the past, obviously, that it probably is a good idea to do this.
I have one more question, maybe John, you can help me with this one, or Jerry. How does the commission pick the representative other than he's not there? What's the method?
I think, you know, John, you can speak for that. I believe they knew that John had the expertise to function
Okay.
as a representative. Because we talked about it in the directors' meeting yesterday with the commission. It's an important assignment, and we encouraged John to come today, that commissioners haven't come in the past. And fortunately, all the stars are lined up. John has the time and inclination and expertise to do it.
I'll teach you to miss the basketball game if this happens. So, okay, and then the other question, and maybe Craig, in your research, or Lois, and some of yours, has there ever been a seat that rotates or floats? That basically, for example, we may have the bike and ped plan before us in 2013. It'd be nice to have, if we wanted to have one of these board members here, rather than the freight person that year. Or if we, in our work program, we know we're gonna be doing the freight plan in 2013, we make sure that the freight person is sitting on the technical committee in 2013. So I mean, it would just seem beneficial to the representative if it was rotating. If if the freight person's here and we're spending the entire year focused on bikes and peds, I mean, obviously they would have value, but I think they would be more appreciative if we were talking about freight, or the port, or the railroad, or the airport, or something like that. So, did you ever find one where it was open and it was rotated by those other committees? I don't know.
I talked to several MPO coordinators around the country, and none of them had any rotating seats.
Okay.
They just,
I mean, it would be difficult to manage, I just didn't know.
I mean, you know, different MPOs have committees that have non-voting members, and so those people will sit in, you know, well, I mean, we had that similar sort of thing with our TAC Plus. We had those different folks coming in for their expertise. I mean, you could certainly do something like that when the freight mobility study came before here. You could have the freight person sitting in for that period of time, but I didn't talk to anyone who had a rotating seat on either advisory committee or their technical committee.
And I'll just add one last comment. When I helped write the last operating agreement, we considered adding the Planning and Zoning Commission rep as a voting member. The reason we didn't was two. One, we were in air quality nonconformity. It was important to have the air quality person. And the other one is we got to 10 members or 12. And it got to an even number. So it's an idea that maybe is right now, given our air quality situation, but anyway, thanks for.
An additional thought, there's nothing stopping the people who lead those two committees, from coming here to our meetings. So, in a sense, to put them on the committee forces them to be here. They could be here anytime they wanted to. And certainly we don't, we wouldn't say, we're not talking about you, leave. It doesn't, we're not like that. So, again, I think, it comes down to a point where Cindy's comments about being focused, when we're dealing with the bike plan, for example, the bike ped plan, we have a great deal of involvement with the bike ped community. When the Freight Advisory Committee is being discussed, certainly Aves and his group is very much involved with us. But generally speaking, we're not focusing entire meetings on one thing. We might have work sessions. Those groups come in to talk to us then. So I just think they have the opportunity to be here now if they wanted to be, and we certainly don't prevent them from giving us as much time as we need.
I'm going to respectfully disagree very strongly with this whole discussion. I believe that the public feels very non-represented on this committee. I think the committees, the advisory committees, don't feel very represented on this committee. I have spent a lot of time informing people of when meetings and other things are occurring. They never hear from anyone else. There are problems with the website. Unfortunately, I do think that when they show up, it's largely, at least on the Bike Ped committee, because I've let them know about things that are happening. I think if you get rid of this seat, and that's what I would see you doing, if we move forward with the city's amendment or potential idea, there's going to be a feeling out there in the public that it's all a very officially run body, and that advisory committees who can't make motions, they can attend the meetings and make a statement, but it's far easier to be overruled and not be taken seriously. I think expanding, I mean, I checked, some of these MPOs are 30, 40 people. Yes, it's true, some of these folks are not paid and wouldn't be able to come, but on the Bike Ped committee, there are a number of people that could come as part of their job. So I actually think there'd be a huge benefit to expand this committee to additional people. We could keep the odd number, make the advisory committee status much more real. I feel real. I am in the position to make motions. And that's why all the comments said that. I mean, if we decided to ignore all the comments that came from the advisory committees, that would, I believe, be a mistake. Mr. Ruler?
So, Craig, in light of our public involvement plan and our plan process review, if we were to have, because all of our planning documents go to planning and zoning for review and recommendations to us and to the assembly. So if we had a planning and zoning commission member here, would they be able to participate if we were actually going to vote on something to send to them to recommend? And could that commissioner then, when they're on planning and zoning, would they have to be recused?
It's a bit of, yeah, I
I
hadn't
mean,
thought about that.
would they be able to actually do that? I mean, look, you think of the assembly members. The assembly members are they're on the policy committee, and then they're representing the assembly, and they share that information, and then they come back. But they act as assembly members, and then when they get to the policy committee seat, they can represent the assembly's wishes, or they can not. Typically,
I
they
think
do.
I think it'd be the same protocol for this particular appointment as well. They could participate as part of the committee, and they could also participate officially as a commissioner.
And, I mean, they could vote here and support or not, and then as a commission member, they could vote or not. But and then obviously, as they're sitting here, they're going to represent the views of the entire commission as best as they can. Okay.
There is official language, and I don't know the document that well, but I think it's in the charter that was added that says the assembly members on the policy committee, whatever way the assembly votes, they have to follow that. It is in there, so just great. Okay.
Is there any other discussion?
All right, I will make
No, we have to open it.
Yes.
And I'm planning to make a motion as well.
We're open to public comment at this time. Is there anybody here that would like to comment?
I guess I would. It sounds like I should.
Mr. Spring?
This kind of took me by surprise, I guess, so I haven't thought about this particular issue about whether or not a planning and zoning commission should be on the AMATS, but I'm just wondering what kind of support the actual commission will have for this type of move. Not that they have input in it, but if the chair, for instance, strongly disagrees with this, and and I had no idea if she does or not, or the other commission members for some reason have a disagreement on it. You may find yourself going before the policy committee with commission members opposing this motion, but I have no idea what their feeling would be about this. So. It might be a good idea to discuss that at the Planning and Zoning Commission, just to get a feel.
It probably would be a good idea, John. I don't think, personally, I don't think they would object to it, but it'd certainly be a good idea to do it.
Any other comments? Right,
Okay.
so back on the committee.
I'm gonna make a motion then. So we have this markup right here. I would move that the strikeout be replaced with, and a member of the AMATS Citizen Air Quality Advisory Committee, and then delete the addition, and then leave the rest of it, designated by the committee. So in essence, none of the underline would be there, and it would just be, the normal language with just the replacement of the Air Quality Advisory Committee. So I move to make that edit. And
You said the air quality both times, so.
Oh, I'm sorry, it just says citizens, air quality, citizen advisory. AMATS Citizen Advisory. The only change to that section. And then, what I'm doing is recommending that we make that change, and then that change then goes to, we then forward that, if it passes with this body, to go and check with the policy, with the planning and because that's what we did. When this first came up, we held it and put it out to the other committees to look at, to comment on. And so if this body decides to accept these changes I'm recommending, then it would then go back to the zoning, planning, zoning, and have them have a comment on it.
Madam
Before
Chair?
we would come back.
I mean, how many, what number would that bring the committee to?
11, it just replaced.
Same.
I think.
No, that's my concern.
Do we need a second or something to continue?
Yeah.
I'll second it for purposes of discussion.
Moved by Ms. Lyons.
I do have concern about that, I think their quality committee representative is an important component to what we do here. And I would prefer to increase the number of members on the TAC than simply reduce one and replace with another.
Any other? Sorry.
That's okay. So Cindy, your motion is to basically just have a citizens advisory committee. We recommend that to the policy committee as a change, but present it to the planning and zoning commission before policy committee decision? Is that what you're looking for? Okay. So Craig, I have one more comment. So Craig, in your comments to having boards, having those advise your peers and other MPOs and having a just advisory, we have a TAC plus all the time and they're just advisory seats. Obviously, they wouldn't. Can those advisors make motions? And if they can make motions, do they actually vote when those things come forward, or do you know?
They only suggested they were non-voting members. I didn't ask specifically whether or not they could make motions. I can find that out, but I didn't ask that.
Because I think from Ms. Epstein, I don't know what the issue that you have is the fact that you can't sit, if you're not at the table, you can't make a motion, or if you're not at the table, you can't vote. I mean, I don't know what.
Both.
Okay.
Craig, can you bring a motion before the committee?
Which committee?
This committee?
No, not as far as I know. Never tried it, but I'm not a member of it.
Okay. Generally speaking, if you have your Citizens Advisory Committee, whatever the committees may be, any of them, if they have something they want to bring before the body, why would we turn it down? What is the purpose of turning down a motion to come forward of us? So, in my mind, part of the workings of this committee would be, Stephanie, you as the head of the committee would introduce these motions to be discussed. I mean, I go back to the issue that these are advisory committees. They were created as an advisory committee to us. You know, because we were an air quality issue a while back, we put the air quality people on board. But we have Cindy here who represents air quality as well. So, you know, my only point here is that I think a working committee, again, why wouldn't we want these people to be here to advise us when necessary? And that's the point. Other than that, are we wasting their time? They're not here now.
And I will mention Steve knows about this, and he was fine with replacing that air quality committee member.
Well, we got two people.
I have a question. Can I actually make motions? I didn't think so. So usually that's why we would
Well,
open
but you can
that.
comment on
I
it.
can comment on them, but I usually,
Sure.
I'm not the one making the motion or second.
But you can bring it forward on behalf of any of those committees. There's nothing wrong with that, in my mind.
Point of clarification. Is that-
So, I think one of the reasons the seat was created was for a public perspective on the workings of the Technical Advisory Committee. And while what you say is true, Bruce, there are other situations where no one on the committee would have recognized the public interest in the way that I feel like I've been able to. And that partly was, the best example is the creation of the Bicycle Ped Advisory Committee. I felt like I was sitting on the technical committee raising non-motorized transportation issues and components. In fact, I think I'll even do that later when we talk about the ranking criteria. And I have some background in that, but not very much. And I think the value of having a freight representative and a bike-headed representative and an air quality representative is that you have people with that level of expertise, just like you have governmental expertise and expertise in construction. And that there's an enormous value to have the participation of these people with that expertise in the overall decision-making, as well as, and I wouldn't ignore this, the credibility of the TAC in general, to have that buy-in from the public, from the advisory committees. And, you know, I think if this seat becomes one of the planning and zoning, which already has a say in almost everything this committee does, and it gets replaced with this seat gets replaced with someone that has another bite at the apple, and this gives them a second bite, it's not going to be looked on favorably by the folks, you know, from the organizations that sit on the advisory committees, and it's not going to be looked on favorably by the media or even by, you know, potentially, I haven't thought about this, but, you know, FHWA. I mean, this is a public seat.
I disagree, Lois. That seat is not a public seat. That seat is a representative of the Air Quality Advisory Committee. I mean, that's the purpose it was created. It wasn't, I mean, you do a very good job representing the issues of the committee and issues that are not related to the committee, and I think all of us should be able to doing, I mean, Ken and I should be representing DOT and transit, but we should also be representing freight and you know, as we all should. Now, it's not a public seat, otherwise it would be called, you know, public at large or something like that. So,
Does it have to have a non-governmental person as part of
no,
the technical committee? It could be completely governmental?
it could not be there.
The tech, well,
I mean, before we.
I guess that's another question for Craig. Is that the norm to not have, to just have governmental people on the
technical
committee?
Yeah.
I haven't looked specifically at that, but it's, I mean, usually the air quality component is what's the strongest point there.
Usually there's not an air quality audit. Usually, that's why you have all the conformity rules. We are very lucky. You go nationally, and they think that because air quality, the DEC has a seat, not only on the technical and the policy, that we are rare. because most of those seats are the politicians and the cities and the governmental people, because usually you have multiple disciplinaries, and multiple communities, you know, jurisdictions, and they all have their technical representatives sitting on that technical committee.
Yeah, I mean, like Fairbanks has a much bigger policy committee than we have. They
Yeah,
have,
it's all.
you know, 2 cities and a borough as well, so.
Chair, can I get in the queue?
I'm gonna say, actually, Mr. Post was next in the queue.
Well, I was curious, Lois mentioned a valid point here, which I think is how FHWA views the composition of the technical advisory committee here. And I thought, if I recall, that there was some mention of this in the recommendations after the last triennial certification. Is that correct?
No, the language that if I recall correctly, out of the last triennial certification had to do with the makeup of planning and zoning, who was acting as our Citizens Advisory Committee. And I think that the recommendation, it wasn't a corrective action, it wasn't a finding, it was a recommendation that basically said, you should look at the representation of your existing Citizens Advisory Committee to make sure it represents a good cross-section of the citizens of Anchorage and transportation stakeholders. So it didn't have any recommendation on the makeup of the TAC, it had to do with the makeup of our Citizens Advisory Committee.
Okay, thank you.
And to follow up on that, we need to send that to the mayor's office to make sure that they have that, so we haven't done that, so let's get that to the boards and commissions first. But my point was, on other MPOs, the composition of the TAC obviously should be a technical group that gives its best professional representation of what we believe is appropriate. But in other MPOs, are there citizen advisory component and members that set part of this group? Does highway administration require such a thing? Do other MPOs have it? I would just like to feel better about the other operation of other MPOs. I don't know.
And on that point, I agree with that we do need more information, but to the extent I'm familiar with MPOs in other parts of the country, I know non-governmental organizations do sit on the technical committees. And you know, comparing it to Fairbanks isn't necessarily a good example because we have a much smaller public interest community here than larger communities do. But typically, there is active involvement in the MPO. I'm not sure specifically about the technical committees, but I imagine that's the case.
I was mentioning Fairbanks just for the fact that AMATS probably I'm pretty sure we have the smallest policy committee in the country.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a lot of other places that have a city this size that there's nothing near you. So we don't have Phoenix and everything all real close where you have, Chicago's board is 80 some odd members. They never get a full board. I mean, we're fortunate in that. So Fairbanks, even though they're a smaller city and they have fewer funds to spend, they have bigger committees, both their policy and their technical committee, just because they have more than one local government there.
Yeah, Craig, I would second that. Fairbanks is actually more representative of a normal MPO model that exists in a region than certainly Anchorage is.
Yeah.
If Matsu was an MPO, then I think you would start to see us start to have a normal model of what MPOs in lower 48 are. So.
Yeah, usually the other representatives, well, what usually happens in other MPOs in their technical committee, you have private transit organizations there. So you'll have a rail line, you'll have someone who's providing intercity bus lines in a private manner, or even another governmental manner that comes and touches part of your organization. So that's where you get a large buildup in your members. You have those entities showing up on your technical committees. So I have not researched specifically citizens advisory committees showing up on your technical committee. I have started to do research on the makeup of a citizens advisory committee, but not who might be on your TAC.
Is there any further discussion at this time?
So just kind of following up with what Craig just said, are we a bit premature with this? Should we maybe think about sending this back to staff give us more information? Just a thought.
Yeah, let me just add, I mean, we have a motion and a second to
Mhm.
modify this, and as a proposed amendment to the operating agreement, that it be presented as a proposal to the Planning and Zoning Commission before we send it to the Policy Committee for action. So, as just replacing the Citizens Air Quality Advisory Committee with the AMATS Citizens Advisory Committee. And if they come back and say we don't want that, we have a better idea, then we can regroup. But parliamentary procedure-wise, I think we've got something on here. We either gotta move on or not act on it and then take something else up. So I call the question.
Yes, we have a motion, we have a second. I know there are members opposed. Do I need to even ask if they're opposed, or should I say we go to a vote? Take a roll call vote then? Yeah, just say, we'll do a roll call vote, because we know. So, Mr. Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Rebecca?
Yeah, I'm going to vote no.
Mr. Weaver? No. Ms. Epstein? No. Mr. Moore?
Yes.
I had to look to see who it was, you're off the corner over there. Mr. Wilbur?
Yes.
Mr. Post?
No.
Come back to me. Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Yes. I'm gonna say no.
But you're passed.
So, that's 4 yes, 5 no.
Chairman,
Mr. Weaver?
I'd say we refer this back to staff, give us some additional information, see how much public involvement are sitting at the table in other MPOs, so we have a better idea. It's like I said earlier, we're very fortunate on the Planning and Zoning Commission today. We've had previous commissioners that are totally committed to the transportation process, gave good representation as being a citizen as part of that group. I think this does strengthen it, if you have the expertise of a commissioner, but at the same time, I believe it's important to have broad community representation in the process. It will probably make the deliberations longer, more lively, but I think it'll be good.
I'm personally interested in just kind of seeing, like I said, how the public is represented. I mean, nothing against you, Lois, but it's my understanding you're the Air Quality Advisory Committee, and you are representing the committee's concerns. And just like Mr. Wilbur said, I mean, yes, I work for the city, but I have my own personal opinions too, and I try to best represent theirs. But if it's in a direct conflict with something I believe in, I will state my own personal opinions on this chair. But we are a technical committee. And our recommendations are supposed to be based on our professional backgrounds. And so I'm interested to see kind of where the public is to be represented and how that is done in other MPOs. I mean, I'm just interested.
And I would second what Jerry, that's kind of what I was saying during the
Yeah.
discussion. Send it back to staff. And Craig, maybe what you do is you pick some reasonably sized MPOs, even though they might be slightly different in makeup, but maybe like Eugene, maybe Spokane, something like that then you can sit down and kind of show how many people in policy committee, who they are, how many's on the technical committee, who they are, what kind of advisory committees that they have, to give us a better flavor of how they have their public involvement and all that. And because I don't think there's any rush for this.
No.
At the same time, from a personal perspective, look into map 21. There's some language in map 21 that you may be having to change the operating agreement anyway. So I think, I can give you some sites in there that you need to look at. Map 21's making some changes.
As far as I know, the changes they've made in relation to the committees have to do with public transportation on your policy committee, so.
That's
that one
part of
we're-
it, yeah.
We're okay with, so.
Well, this is the operating agreement though, so.
Yeah, the
And we-
operating agreement meets the MAP 21 standards for that particular topic.
And we know what happened last time. We were being encouraged to change the operating agreement.
AMATS 1, others 0.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. Now on-
discussion.
Yes, on to item 5C, the AMATS area boundary update.
So you have your nice little pretty map. I haven't read it. The discussion was related to, well, we brought this before you at the last meeting, I believe. We talked about some of the suggested boundaries and how they came to be. Basically, the boundaries related to the census tracts. At the last meeting, I believe there were two main questions that came up. One was, if you look at the area around the Air Force Base, the Air Force part of J-Bear, where it appears in those hash lines there that the census tracts now take in the flight line. The suggestion was to, if I remember correctly, the suggestion was to add in those areas so that we're kind of getting all of the outside parts of the boundary. So part of that was the hash line, part of that is the blue line. That was about the only place where we're really talking about smoothing it versus what the census tract shows. The census tract shows there are lots of people living on that airfield. I'm not certain that that's correct. And then the other question was where we have the hash lines up through the river, this would be an expansion of the urbanized area boundary. Does the designation as an urbanized area boundary change what we have to do with facility out there? In other words, if you're building a new facility or do you have to upgrade a facility out in Chugach Eagle River, if it's in the urbanized area boundary, now do you have to build it to urban collector standards as versus rural collector standards? The discussion I had with the folks that know more about that topic than I do say the decision on whether or not to build something to a certain design standard has to do with the zoning districts and not the OSNHP or the AMATS urbanized area boundary. So we would not have to worry that if we designate something an urbanized area, that if you're building a facility out there, you have to build it to an urban collector. You can still build it to whatever collector you want to, because this doesn't designate whether something is urban or rural as it pertains to the design standards. So there's the answer to that. I wanted to get the corrections done on the map, but the ability to get GIS time out of folks combined with something crashing on the ARC thing, whatever, Hardy, or I don't know what that is called, but it was not working, so I couldn't get a new map. So I don't know I don't believe that there's a giant rush to get this done today. If the desire is to fix the map before it's before you. So I'm gonna say that the likelihood of me getting the GIS folks to fix this map in the month's time is pretty good, but I couldn't get it done today, just because of the time I can get out of folks that don't work for me.
Mr. Carr?
Craig,
Yes, sir.
if I remember correctly, in 1990, Eagle River used to be connected to us as part of the urbanized area. And then in 2000, when they changed the definitions and they changed them to urban clusters and all this happy stuff, it's when Eagle River went floating off into the sky there. My question is this, there is a specific urbanized area zone that is created by the centennial, the census. An NPO has the option, if they wish, to create a different boundary that may show how the urbanized area may go in the next 10 years, 20 years if you want. So we can make pretty much whatever we want as long as it's not less than what the urbanized area zone was. Is that correct?
I believe that's
Okay. Well, we're trying to include part of Elmendorf, and we exclude Fort Richardson. And as you go through this thing, my real question is why are we still showing this difference between Anchorage, Elmendorf, Fort Richardson, and Eagle River? I mean, there really should be connected in my mind if you're going to create a smoother boundary, if you want, what's going to happen in the next 10 years, next 20 years. So that's my thought.
I guess that what I can say is, again, I'm not a GIS expert. When I gave the kind of information to those people to do, they came up with, they said, these are shape files based on the census tracts, and just saying those words has exhausted my knowledge on that topic, but this is what it came back to be. And so I don't know where Elmendorf stops and Fort Rich begins, now that it's all JBear, but this is what those files came back to show as these are the census tracts as the new urbanized area boundary, what it should be. The idea of we can draw the lines the way we want, that's basically the idea of smoothing those lines. And as long as you have a good justification to when you deliver it to the FHWA and FTA saying, here's what we think it is, which is a little different than it originally came back, but here our justification, I'm sure you'll be fine. So,
well, again, the intent of that is the MPO looks ahead to the future. I mean, you've got how many people on JBear? 25,000 people.
And it's going to be growing.
And it continues to grow. So my thought was, you've got elected representatives that those people vote and all that happy stuff. And yet when we sit down here and talk about how these things come together, we exclude them. And that to me just doesn't seem reasonable. I was really surprised when the Census Bureau changed their definitions of what are, they just excluded the military is what it boiled down to. Now it looks like they're trying to bring them back in a little bit, but then we ignore one half of JBear. We have, what do we have? JB? JB.
You have E.
Yeah.
You have the E.
That's right, yeah. But anyway, that's just,
we don't spend our federal funds there anyway, so I'm not sure why they're even included in our boundary.
just,
So Craig, in our purpose in life, what's more important to us in planning a program, the AMATS boundary or the urbanized boundary?
Well, the urbanized area boundary is what they use to, if I'm, Bart can help me out on this, but it's what they use to determine our PL funds. So bigger urbanized area boundary suggests that you would get more PL funds, more of the planning funds for the planning side of the house, staff time, et cetera, as opposed to capital projects.
Okay. So as the census recognized an urbanized area, if the MPO recognizes those as well, as we should at a minimum, as we're required to, that's a no-brainer. The question is, as it currently stands, the AMATS boundary, where we do all our planning and programming, includes the green line, which is the perimeter. So that green line's really not changing very much, except for maybe, it's not even changing at all.
Nothing's changing.
Okay. So our planning boundaries aren't changing at all. It's the urbanized areas that we would then accept by incorporating that red area on the hillside, on the south side of Anchorage, and then snapping the blue line to reflect, as we're talking, the red inside JBear, and we're golden.
Sure, I think I'd probably go further than that to use all of JBear's boundary, because if we can make it larger, we might as well, and instead of getting into the minutia, the weeds of the JPEG, the shape files and the census tracts, and just looking at that, all of JBear is an urbanized boundary, so we should probably just connect the dots to include Eagle River, Anchorage, and JBear as the urbanized boundary area, and be done with it.
And when you say include the area, do you mean like exclusive, the areas that I guess are?
The actual runway, I think it's inconsequential, just include the boundaries. We have the boundaries for JBear. Just go up and move on up to include all of Eagle River that they've identified in census tracts as urbanized area. can be done like that.
I mean, the blue line around Ted Stevens goes right around Runways.
Right.
Yeah, I know. So really the blue area, rather than, right now as it stands, we would have the blue area that represents the Anchorage and the blue area that represents the Eagle River, and we're recommending just kind of merging that together with the base in between, so we really have one urbanized area covering the entire MPO.
Right.
Is there any other questions?
Are we voting on
We
something?
haven't made a motion, we haven't done anything.
Oh.
We haven't got to the public yet either, so
Okay.
we're still.
All right.
I'm keeping track of it.
Runways or no runways? All right.
Mr. Wilbur, did you have?
I would just recommend, I want to see a clean map before we vote on it. I wouldn't vote on this map, but I agree in principle. Mr. Rebuffalo and Mr. Weaver's.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna, okay, Mr. Lloyd.
So what does this do other than affect PL funds?
Mark or Dave are waving your hand.
Say, suppose it's like.
Actually, I'll defer to the
All right,
roll.
Bart.
Three things: PL funds, functional classification. So roads in the urbanized boundary are urban, arterial, urban collector versus rural collector, rural arterial. May have some issues on design standards in other areas or other MPOs. I don't think it has that influence here. And then the third one is the reporting that we do through our HPMS data. We report back to USDOT versus urban versus rural roads. So there's three main things: reporting, PO funds, and functional classification, basically.
Yeah, that would make a difference, because some of these areas I know would, the Census Bureau urbanized area down here off of Golden View, most of, like, all those roads in that area are technically considered rural. I mean, so if they become part of this urban, yeah, the way they're being.
So they're now urban collectors, urban.
Yeah. I mean, some of them are urban, because there are others are not. There's interesting, kind of interesting.
But it doesn't affect the design standards.
It doesn't affect, yeah, you say it doesn't affect the design standards, but I guess that would affect some of the ways we have things coded in GIS, because when we do the reporting.
Right,
for that,
it'll change the classification in GIS.
classification for that. I'm just trying to clear it up. Mr. Martin?
Would it increase the data collection requirements that we have? Traffic data would require that we collect collision data on GVR, that type of thing.
Everything that we report on for our urban roads, we would have to collect for the roads now encompassed in these areas. I don't know if we already do that or not, though. We may already be doing that.
On GVR?
I don't.
Oh, not on JBER, but I mean, like in the Eagle River area that was previously not classified urban area, we have that data.
I know we collect data, I mean, in Eagle River we do, but I know,
You're
I'm
right.
positive we don't do
You would have
anything
to.
in, on JBER,
Mhm.
just for security purposes, I mean, not being able to.
One question, and I guess I'm a little bit confused about the design standards issue, but with the change in functional classification, you say being, urban collector, I mean, does that not go ahead and change the starting point, for the design? Obviously, I think we have kind of flexibility to go ahead and deviate from that, but my understanding was that it does actually go ahead and have some implication on the starting point for design standards, and I guess I'd ask Mr. Moore here.
It would have a difference in the starting point, yes, but I don't have the sense that it would change the end result. We have flexibility in it.
If it's based more, if what Craig was saying earlier, that we're still allowed to base the design more on the surrounding land use for those land uses and even zoning land uses within those areas, they may be calling this urban population, but we know from the land use, the density and everything else, that it's rural. Yeah, it may change the process a little bit, but I don't know if it changed the end point. Mr. Weaver?
Hey, so staff's gonna clean up the map, bring it back, and we'll deal with it at a future date.
Do we have to make a motion, this is business item for us, or we just? Did we, I never opened a public comment, did I? No. So, before we do that, is there any comments or questions from the public members who are here?
if it could be clarified on whether or not we're including some of those areas.
No.
We're cleaning that now.
Can we see both?
Yeah.
Really?
It's about the discussion. Don't mean to eavesdrop.
You make it right.
It's about the discussion.
Someone who knows how to do that will do it.
Well, can we see both? The one that's the original one proposed and see the one that's the actually include all of theater as well.
They're just gonna ignore the shape files, Greg, and just move the lines.
Yeah.
It's easy.
Yeah. We are now on to item 5E. And that's 2015-2018 Transportation and Shipment Plan Draft Ranking Criteria.
Okay, so these are your criteria based on the work sessions we had. Yes. How many billions of dollars? So they're before you, and the idea would be you want to release these for public comment. I will tell you that both Bart and I ranked, I think, 5 projects, and we ranked them. He ranked them at his desk, and I ranked them at my desk, and we both came up with the same rank. So that suggests to me that they're working pretty well, and it also made sense what was at the top and what was at the bottom. So I think they're a good improvement from where they were. We added a lot of language in there that makes them look more relevant to map 21. So happy to try and answer some questions if you have them. So what you think?
At the work session, they asked me to apply a weighting. So every category is worth 10 points and they're weighted differently. So how I did that was just the categories that were rated 20 points got a 1, 15 got a 0.75, 10 points got a 0.5. So this is the first time you guys are seeing the weighting.
Thank you.
The CMAC ones had that rating already.
Yeah, but the other ones that did not.
Yeah, and I cleaned up the scoring on the CMAC one as the work session talked about as well. So everything adds up to 100 now, and the weightings work out appropriately. Nothing was changed, it's just proportions. That's all.
Yeah, I think all the math that brought up.
So I mentioned earlier that there was a point I was going to weigh in as an area that I think the public would be very interested in, and that is related to the weightings. That on each of these, I feel like the weightings for the concerns the public might have were disproportionately low compared to the weightings for things like safety and cost. And I recognize that that can be something they comment on, everyone comments on in the, during the public comment period, but we could also discuss it and see if we want to change it before it goes out for public comment. The things I would identify are numbers 5, 6,
Which criteria?
on 12, yeah, I'll go in the roadway and safety project.
Okay.
But it was a pattern on all of them. I also wonder whether it makes sense to have something like a 0.35 weighting, number 12, which to me is, potentially a little too precise, given that everything.
It was just a direct
Yeah.
correlation of what the current points were. That was the middle. There was some that were currently 6 points, so it was the middle one. And one of the categories only adds up to 9 points, and that was a 0.35 category.
So-
Yeah, they're certainly open.
Yeah, so I would increase that to 0.5 there, but I think it's gonna jump out at people that the livability concerns are ranked much lower than it would otherwise be. And then if you go to the transportation alternative, the numbers there, again, are lower, number 3, and so,
Actually much higher on the TA.
Sorry?
So they're actually much higher on the TA, because they're 0.5 and 0.75.
some, yeah, but not And then number 12 has .6. Again, I question the precision of that, whether that's the right number. And then in CMAC, the one where it's stated as the public's views, that was substantially less than the first two categories. And again, it's got a weird 6.5, it kind of implies a level of precision that I don't think we really have. So two comments, really. One is we don't want to be biased against, the public views and just focus on more traditional criteria that have been used in the past, but also I question whether we want to have these odd weightings that don't seem to follow the pattern.
Let the record show that Ms. Kyle is reading it before. I know part of the discussion, we had extensive discussion in the work
Yeah, I
sessions
apologize.
about the public, the neighborhood quality support project, and I think the lower weightings was not so much that we were placing less significance on them, it's the difficulty in actually defining them.
Right.
And because how do you say that something is, and we actually kind of changed some of the verbiage because we had, a lot of support of the project is documented, and we got conversely a lot of non-support or, adversity has been documented for the project. But depending on your personal viewpoint, you could have a group of 30 people, 3 of them are very vocal against the project, the other 27 don't really say much of anything. Does that mean there's strong supported opposition to the project when there's only 3 out of 30 people that are opposed to it? And it's not that you want to ignore those 3 people, but what do you have? We extensively discussed it, and all of them that we sat down and looked at these weightings is it's not that we're trying to discard them by any means, but they definitely are, I guess, less tangible to define in some of the other factors.
It was a qualitative sense of
Yes.
good or bad, right or wrong, more than it was something that you could quantify in some way.
Although for some projects, you definitely could quantify things like support. The newspaper talks about it and editorializes, or there's some sort of polling, which sometimes is done on environmental impact statements. So I guess I understand your point, and I'm not sure I agree with it that just because something's a little harder to quantify in all cases, it should be weighted less.
I'm sure.
I'm sorry, Jerry, you go ahead. Listen, I was surprised to see the way the weighted factors were done, because in my mind, I had a whole different concept. Whenever I've seen them used before, if you added up the value of all the weights, you got to 1.0. So you were forced to sit there, and in the case of the first one, you have 15 different items. You got to cut that 1.0 up in some kind of priority order and give a fraction of it to each of those as part of the distribution of the weighting factors. But I guess as long as you've consistently done it, it really, the math is going to give you the same answer in the end, I would think.
And we had a lengthy discussion about this at the last go-around. My question is just, does this just reflect what we decided previously?
I don't know, you could incorporate most of those comments that we talked about.
Yeah, we incorporated all the comments.
All the comments, and one of the other things that we did, if you remember the comment about adding the source of where we get these criteria from, so that's why you'll see source national goal versus source MTP. So obviously, the 7 national goals that are in MAC 21, those things we need to pay attention to. That's part of their.
That's an important
Strong.
So I have kind of comments on 3 items. And staff's asking that the technical committee release this for public review. So how are you going to make it known that it's available? How long are you gonna put it out there? And so what's the method that you're gonna do it? Is it gonna be is your idea to release it today for 30 days? And is the idea to, and is 30 days going to be enough? Are we on a time frame to do this? So what's the staff's recommendation on this one?
Well, we are on a time frame,
Okay.
because we need to have this is the 15 to 18 tip. So
Okay.
we need to have it, third quarter of 14 or something, I guess, would be when you want it. So there's obviously a little bit of time, but you also have that entire, how the process, getting it through the assembly and all that sort of stuff. So, there's a certain amount of time. My plan is to have these posted on our website. I mean, they're posted on there right now as a link to the agenda, but on our homepage, we'll have a big thing that talks about tip criteria released. Here they are, a link to it. You can download the PDF, you can look at it. My thought was to release it for 30 days, but I'm happy to release it for longer if that's what the committee wants. And then also send out an email blast letting people know with the link, here's what we're doing right now.
And my next comment would be, I just ask you to create the CMAC criteria in a readable format, whether you print it so they look the same or distinguish them, because if it pulls up on the site like this and people have to move stuff around on the screen, I don't think it's going to be very well received. And my last comment would be, I would suggest that before you do whatever we do, you explain it in a short memo that these criteria are used to rank and score federal projects. They are going to be used to evaluate roads, transportation, and congestion mitigation and air quality projects. And I would even just do an example score. Show how they would be to pick a project. I don't care what it is. Just, pick one that's already being underway. Don't pick a very controversial one. Braille, CMAC, and others. So
You can do
people know
Northern
how these are
Access.
going to be applied. I mean, pick one that would be, so people know how we are going to use it and how we would draft.
Come on. Well, I guess on that point, the idea is that when you rank and score, you have X amount of people in the room. And I may give Northern Access a 2 and Bart may give it a 10 or something. The idea is different people are going to rank it differently. I hope they're going to feel free to rank it however they want to. So the numbers aren't going to come up. But you could easily, we could throw in a project that was, Martin Luther King Drive.
Or,
And rank that.
or put something on that or encourages them, give them a score sheet, encourages them to score a project, to use it. And then I would do it longer than 30 days. Depending on the weather calendar, I would go, we're in the middle of April. I would give councils at least 2 rounds to look at this thing. If you can accommodate till the end of May, I would encourage it, because if people don't believe in the method in which we're going to evaluate, by the time we put a draft out, they're not going to appreciate how we got there. And putting it on the web is not enough. You need to let the councils know, you need to go to the Federation of Community Councils meeting and say, we're doing this, or it has to be more than it's on the web and some, because people don't know that. And so this is the foundation of our tip, so I would really encourage a little extra effort when we do it, so.
I would strongly endorse that. We've gotten to a habit where we put something on a web and we think everyone's going to access that, but they don't. And I like the idea of an example, even though people may score them differently. At least this gives people an example of just what it is. It's an example. Here's how I would score this project.
Or make a
And then,
first in May.
well, yeah, make one up if you want to. But
I need an example, I guess just being an engineer and trying to work through the numbers here. Does this mean that congestion's twice as important as safety when you congestion reduction? This is a 5 with a weighting category of 1. One is a score of 10 with a weighting category of 1. How does that roll?
No,
They're-
if you
they're
look
both
at the
the same
safety.
time.
But the
they're
fact that I have
both
the
10
question
points.
means it's not intuitively
Gotcha.
obvious. That's one of my.
So an example would make it intuitively.
Yes, that's-
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yes.
So Greg, can we go until, can we accommodate a open period so we don't have to act on this until June, or is that too long?
The schedule that we originally came up with had a 30-day public comment period and gave us about 6 months wiggle room before we had to get the tip adopted, so we have time to do extra.
I mean, obviously, there's other parallel work that can be
We
done,
can
you're not gonna be in.
tighten up other things,
Oh,
yeah.
but I just,
I get more than enough stuff to do, don't worry.
I'd say going any further than June may not work, because most community councils
They're
don't
not
meet
gonna-
past a certain point. I mean,
They don't meet in
through
June.
the end of May, I mean, give them until that time, that does give them.
and it gives our advisory
Until
committees
September
an opportunity to look at this stuff too and say, I think it's good, and they'll have an opportunity to potentially meet twice.
Yeah. So you say double it and say 60 days, or you say.
Well, I would-
Well, from now until June, first meeting, tech meeting in June,
Yeah.
have it back.
Well, you
then.
want the comments.
Well, yeah, but I mean, yeah, so you're really looking at, what, 45, 50 days?
I would recommend that we release it for public review until May 31st, which is a Friday. And then post it on the web, explain in a cover memo. So now you can do this in motion step.
We haven't opened this to public comment.
Okay, so I'll just make the comments until the 31st, and then put a short little memo on the front that says this is used for ranking projects. This is what they're doing. We're interested in your comments on the ranking. We're interested in your comments on the criteria. Please send your comments to so-and-so. Get on the Federation Community Council's agenda and say, this is out there, make it available. And, whatever type of proper outreach you think, certainly the advisory committees, the Air Quality Advisory Committee, with a bike, and make a presentation to them. Go to those committees and tell them what we've got. So those are my thoughts when we get there. And make it readable.
Just a comment, I liked your idea of picking a project to use as a sample, that was a completed project.
Oh, that's a good idea.
You know, it's something people recognize, something people know, they understand what it is, and you don't have a risk of somebody arguing with you about debate about whether or not it should be done or should be required.
But it gives them, like they said, they can follow the thought process and go through it. The sample is good. Is there any other comments from the committee before I open it to public? Hearing none, we are now open to the public. Are there any questions or comments on this topic? All right, now it's back with us. Mr. Yoder, you want-
Madam Chair, I make a recommendation that we, Technical Advisory Committee, release the draft project ranking criteria for roads, transportation alternatives, and congestion mitigation and air quality until May 31st. And direct the staff to provide this information on the web, give a short example of how a completed project would have been ranked. Reach out to the Federation of Community Councils and our advisory committees.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Wilbur, seconded by Mr. Rebecca. Are there any opposed? Hearing none, we are so. That brings us through. All right, we're through the business items, we're now on to the informational report. So I should say the first quarter obligation report.
All right, that's the colorful document that's in front of you in your spreadsheet. I'll just quickly recap what the columns mean. The first column in the tannish color is the numbers that are in our TIP. This is a list of all the TIP projects. The middle column, the greenish column.
Can I interrupt momentarily? Would anybody be opposed if we make a short bathroom break? You don't want to do this.
No, at ease for 5 minutes.
Just for I should have done it before we started, but I just thought to myself, I'll be right back.
I didn't hear a motion.
I said a motion to at ease. I think.
I heard the waves swashing.
Well, we can't. I'll have a chair.
Or- Question.
I don't know.
On that C
I
Street
got
facing,
some pictures to send you.
that
I put
that
my-
money that we had here?
My trusty
project.
agent on it, so I have a bunch of
Eight.
I
pictures to
think,
see.
you know.
Thank you.
We're using
read
that,
from them.
DOT and
Oh, I have to-
railroad is using
I'll have
that
to
for
figure out how to
that
forward an email to you.
ITS project.
I mean, I keep thinking about.
Well, now,
You know,
put
you
sign.
don't want to be the
The
middleman.
sign is the
Yeah.
right.
Information.
Yeah, it's just, it's
suggestion
not
things to
a
people,
tip project
you know,
anymore.
and,
It's an HSIP project
yeah.
now.
That's not the tip, that's not federal funds?
It's federal funding.
I
it's
think
not
so, because
tip
they
project.
have
Good,
that.
I'm drinking water.
Yeah.
My hero. I gotta drink more water.
We don't report on the HSIP projects in here
I know it's
because
gonna be
this is
on
just
it.
the projects that AMATS
That
has
was-
control over. So
Maybe just for information purposes, you can put in,
add a note that that's.
add a note that that's, because at least it makes it look like it's being utilized.
Right. But it's, you know,
I can do that.
putting something on is almost like putting in a sentence.
Then on the second one, while we're breaking here, on the second page, that third project, the railroad grade separations, didn't we do a report?
To give up on caffeine, you're just.
Did what?
You could always.
Did you all do a report?
We did.
Hanging on to that one,
So
man.
this is, the project is now closed and
Okay.
the leftover money has been put back in.
Okay.
But the report's done.
Mountain Dew. Job.
Is that report ever published?
I don't think so.
Why not? That's why.
It might have oversight.
I think it'd be good.
So, yeah.
Well, it would be bad to present it to AMATS.
One over fund.
Yeah.
Fuel and water.
Are we ready for the business?
Just recently,
Yes, and
how
John.
you moved and John's, each of you guys moved there,
Who knows where that would be. I'm sure they're anxiously awaiting this obligation.
I'm sure they are. All right, if you'd like to, thank you for pausing for me, everybody.
No worries. Okay, so the first tannish column are the numbers that are in the approved tip. The green is what's been obligated so far. The blue column is what we anticipate is left to obligate. So sometimes those number differs based on construction overruns and lower bids. So I won't, you've already seen this once. This is the second quarter report, so the numbers in the blue. We have yet to obligate. There's going to be a little bit more money needed on the Glen Highway rehab. That's the fourth project down. That's just due to change orders and overruns. O'Malley Road is in our tip for right-of-way. We anticipate obligating that money still. The Fireweed project has been closed, so the leftover money's been put back in AMATS, the de-obligation there at $1.8 million. Pavement replacement program, we're moving forward on A Street, and we're getting ready to open up a design phase for the Eagle River Road resurfacing project, the 0 to 5.3. So the money in the blue is for A Street. Dowling Road, you see in the first column, we have 16 million in the tip. We were gonna AC $12.4 million, then we have some earmark money, and then we need a little bit more, so what we have to obligate is the 22.986 million. So that we're anticipating the total cost of that to be obligated this year.
Jim is going to get that done this year, obligated.
That's what we heard.
He's just waiting for the railroad.
We're done.
I couldn't pass up the opportunity.
Yeah, he understands that without this project, we're in a situation where that's money. Couple projects down, the Spinard Road project is the process of being closed, or is closed, and so that money leftover money can be obligated back into the program. Safety Improvement Program, that money will be obligated as identified in the tip. Bruce recommended that we had a note that the C Street Phase 4 crossing is now part of an HSIP project, so I'll make a note in that before it goes to PC that we do have some ITS components of that moving forward. On the second page, you see the three other projects that were de-obligated or closed. In the total, for just the roadway portion, we've had $4.5 million come back into the program, just on de-obligations. The TE, the Transportation Enhancement category, everything is working out the way it's supposed to. We've already, the bicycle plan implementation, we're working to obligate that money now. We have an agreement between the state and municipalities to move those projects forward. CMAC, down towards the end there, and on the third page, everything in this is still in the process, but it should line up exactly with what's in the tip. There should be any surprises there. And then if you look on the fourth page, you see right above the red box, we have 30 million dollars we need to obligate. We've had $4 million in fee obligations, that's 26 million. All said and done, we're $416,000 short. So we've been trying to make up that gap in Dowling Road more and more. So we're pretty much there with rounding stuff. We might have a couple more de-obligations. We do have a couple active construction projects that may overrun. So we're at this point in time, we're looking pretty good. Anything could change, but we're going to be tight. And then the bottom two are just informational things that what we're spending on the national highway system. Getting ready to open up the right-of-way phase for Dowling on Seward Highway. And then on the bottom there, DeBar Road is moving towards construction. So those money will be obligated above and beyond what the EMS program. Any questions?
Any question on Hayward Road rehab, is that to be done this year?
The resurfacing project? No, just design will be started this year.
The road project from 553 out, sir. But not the part from town if you will.
Okay.
Yeah, so the reconstruction project is this year.
Hey, Bart, I know we're narrowing down on our target, and our target end of first quarter is 15%, which is January. So we're now in the end of our second quarter. What's our policy target to be?
10%.
10?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
In the upper right-hand corner, it's noted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments?
Curious why the municipal projects that are general fund don't show up in this.
We could add them as informational items like we do the EHS. It's just that we don't keep that reporting. Huh?
Alternatively, why would we show these if there isn't the counter?
Well, we have the information to show these. This is the state report. We could coordinate with the municipality and show the municipal roads as well.
I mentioned that to Jerry next Friday. Kansas.
The older one.
Yeah. Once again, we're volunteering for people not here. Any other questions or comments? Any questions or comments from the public? All right, the next item is 6B, the public transportation.
Kristen's going to lead us in that.
So my name is Christine Sunday. I'm with the planning division for the public transportation department. And I wanted to take this opportunity to go over with you some of the major activities that public transit is undertaking in 2013. And I'll be focusing on our departmental process for service. Because this is timely because we are right now in the initial stages of evaluating our service for our proposed July service change. So our last service change that we instituted was in August 2012. And it was a pretty minor service change. They're mostly just refining our running times. We do annually evaluate our service, which may or may not lead to a service change. And obviously, our service can be subject to budget limitations, so that could also require a service change. But we do try to limit conducting a service change to just one time per year. And our service change can include increasing service, so increasing our headways or instituting completely new routes. It can involve removing service, realigning routes, or changing our service, and then it could just be changing our running times. And it is a pretty time-consuming process. Depending on the scope, it can take up to 7 months. And so what are we doing right now internally to begin the service change process? We are continuously, throughout the year, evaluating our running times. This is really it's sort of changed how we've done it lately with new technology that we got on our buses in 2008, the MDCs, the ABL. We now have a lot more robust data on our trip times, or our trip segment times. And so we're able to look at average days, average drivers, to determine if we are attributing enough time and adequate time for each of our trips and trip segments. We're also looking at operational considerations, any safety issues. We undergo an analysis of possible route changes or realignments as necessary, and that can be initiated from driver, staff, public comments, or it can also be motivated by external factors such as new development. And then all of this analysis and evaluation is always done in the context of our budget. And as I said, we're right now at the beginning stages of evaluating our service change. We don't have a scope at this point, but I did want to walk you all through some of the priorities that we have already identified. So our Public Transportation Advisory Board, if you're not familiar with it, they do advise the Assembly and Mayor on transit issues, and they're actively involved in our long-range planning for transit. They've identified the following priorities. So for the Route 45, they recommended providing new service to alleviate overcrowding. The Route 45 runs from downtown through Mountain View, and then it goes past Providence to the Alaska Native Medical Center.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. And they also recommended increasing our headways on the Route 75 to 30-minute headways. That's also due to overcrowding issues. And the 75 also goes from downtown along Tudor, and then it ends at the VA clinic by Cottonu. Thirdly, they recommended improving Eagle River service, and then also expanding and improving South Anchorage service. The Public Transit Department has also met internally to identify some priorities that we have. The department staff also identified the Route 75 and Route 45 as issues. A safety issue was submitted by operations on the Route 8. And then we're also looking at refining all of our running times again.
Hey, hold on there, Christine.
I support Route 8.
No. So Statham Hill is on the north side of DeBar, east of Boniface.
I'm actually getting to it.
And, oh, okay.
So
Well, there's a lot of whispering over here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. My bad.
If you've ever driven it, you'd know why.
right.
Yeah.
And so when we're looking at all of these priorities and issues, we ask ourselves a lot of questions, and it's just really important for us to balance our finances, efficiencies, equity, accessibility, safety, and a host of other issues. So now I'm going to get into a little bit more detail about a couple of those priorities. This aerial is showing a portion of our Route 8 by Statham Hill that I said was identified as a safety issue. Specifically, it's this little kink right here, right at the bottom of the hill. And it's a narrow road, it's a really sharp turn, and it's particularly unsafe in bad weather conditions. We've actually had 3 incidents so far this year with our buses.
They've had to close the road.
But where is that? Can you put that?
Yes,
Here, I'll
this is
text.
Boniface here
Yes,
to the west. This is
Yeah.
DeBar to the south. This is Turpin to the east. And then up here off the aerial is the Glen.
Yeah.
This is, I think,
What
6.
school is that, Steph?
That's Ptarmigan Elementary, and Edwards is where that is.
Okay.
So it's like,
It's
you
off
know,
of
if you ever
Edwards.
come down this, you're going up a hill,
Yeah.
and you kind of hit the peak right here. This is Donna. This is Donna Drive. Yeah, it's peak, and you're coming downhill, and it's a downhill curve that's kind of super elevated. The major direction of traffic, as you can see, this is a cul-de-sac. So the main direction of traffic is this way and this way.
Right.
But, and it is, the grades are terrible. It's an intersection that needs to be redesigned, but I know there's a lot of right-of-way concerns and
Right.
everything.
And so in icy conditions, it's obviously an issue for buses, but even in the summer, there are cars parked on the hill, and it's just generally an operational issue for us. We're currently evaluating alternatives. We do have a bad weather detour that our drivers can use in bad weather, but it's going here on Norman and looping around on Winding Way and then going up Edwards to go back on route on the 6th. And it doesn't appear to be a good long-term option. So, you know, right now we are looking at all the other alternatives, as I've said.
Out of curiosity, is that a heavily used route?
It is one of our higher productivity routes. However, that portion right there, we don't get a lot of on-off riders right there. So that's what we're sort of looking at. With the mobile home communities over here, we do get quite a few riders in this area. And then when you get back over to Turpin, it sort of picks up a little bit more too. But we're obviously balancing wanting to be able to serve those neighborhoods with safety and our efficiencies and everything, so.
You have a missing collector connection.
Just-
I was gonna say.
Well, that's the only one that we have in town.
I keep trying to draw a line straight across.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
There is a lot of topography in this area. It's hard to see on the aerial photo, but everything kind of up and down. I grew up in this neighborhood. I had friends who lived on that hill, and in the wintertime, we'd sit at the house and watch people slide through the intersection and the stuff that happened. So, yeah.
Okay, so another department identified issue or priority is basically it's our in-trip logistics at Tacotinu Commons and the VA clinic. This is for Route 75. The end trip is actually at the VA clinic. You can see it here on the left. It's a new facility. They have a nice area for our drivers to park for the layover. They allow us access to the clinic, for their breaks, so that's great. However, Tacotinu Commons is a major ride generator for us, and so right now the Route 75 is serving Tacotinu both on the outbound and then as well on the inbound. So if you can imagine that every time they're coming to end their trip, they're going into Tacotinu, going down the access drive past all those stop signs. They turn around at the end behind the theater and then come back through all the stop signs again to stop at the one bus stop we have that serves the shopping center on their property. And then they go across the VA, and then they do the whole thing all over again before they leave the area. And so it's just something that we're evaluating right now. We don't have any solutions, but it's definitely something that we need to look at. Another priority area was our Muldoon Transit Hub and then the Creekside Wishbone. If you're familiar with that, I think that's Friedenmeier, the Walmart going over here to the west. And our Muldoon Transit Hub is located on street here at Muldoon and DeBar. And with this Creekside development, the signal at 12th will be relocated up to 11th. And the signal at 12th is really important for our riders. They are able to cross the street more safely there to transfer buses. And so, with the relocation, that's just something that we're going to have to look at as well. Our route restructure plan, our blueprint, and the update from 2009 actually recommends that we look at eventually having an off-street facility here or a combination on-street, off-street facility. So these are sort of larger issues that we're dealing with and have to evaluate. And so that was really the major priorities that I was hitting on. Again, we haven't finalized a scope for our service change, so we're always looking for comments from AMATS and the public on issues. I did want to move on to some of the major capital projects that are going on in 2013 for transit. We're looking at completing UMed Phase 3. And that's the construction of an illuminated pedestrian pathway on the north side of Providence Drive, which is sort of shown here and here. And then it also includes a bus stop at Elmore to accommodate more transfers. The design and bidding of UMed Phase 4 should be taking place this summer, and that is to expand the bus stop at Alumni in Providence, which is also this intersection, to a pullout that can accommodate 4 buses. It'll also include a larger customized shelter and roadway crossing improvements. And construction for that is anticipated for 2014. We're moving forward with the Diamond Center Transit and Intermodal Improvements Project. We hope to begin construction in 2014 and completion in 2015. And this just shows all the improvements that we're doing or planning to do. The light blue here at the bottom, those are existing pedestrian pathways. All the pink are planned pedestrian facilities. So we're really looking at improving the pedestrian and bus access and connections on site. This is actually our transit center back here tucked to the west of the mall. We'll be doing drainage improvements. And then the project will also be improving the geometry and access to the site on Diamond Center Drive up at Diamond Boulevard here.
So right now, in order for us to get to the Diamond Center, you can't make a right turn in at that. So every single trip has to loop the block to come in across from Sports Authority on 88. It's the only way, it's a one-way drop-off and pickup on the Diamond Center. So what we're gonna be able to do is we can come in on from the north side. Can you point to that, Christine? Up by, yeah. We can come in and then go straight to the transit center, and then we're gonna load and unload on both sides of the transit center.
Right.
It takes us 25 minutes to get around that block during peak shopping times. We lose a huge amount of travel time just navigating traffic.
And as Lance mentioned, the other thing is to improve the transit center so that we can have two-way bilateral movement of buses at the center, because as you can see, they are just able to access it on this one side. So that should also help our operations there. A few other highlights for 2013. This is obviously not all inclusive, but there's the Penland Parkway between Airport Heights and Bragaw project that will be going on. It's a PM&E project, but they're great partners to work with, and they are constructing ADA boarding pads, pedestrian amenities, and two bus pullouts. And then they're improving the storm drains, which you can see on this picture on the right. That will definitely be helping transit operations in the area.
I thought that was very serious, actually.
Yeah, the advertising actually says life jackets save lives. We'll also be doing bus stop improvements at the soon-to-be natural pantry site at CN 36. And we'll just be doing our standard on-street facility improvements. So there will be a shelter, a bench, trash can, and pedestrian lighting.
Natural Pantry used to be at CN 36.
The new natural pantry is
Right next to the library.
right next to the library.
Yeah.
Right next to the post office.
South of the post office.
Across the street from the movie
Nice
theater,
movie
big
theater.
empty lot.
Yeah, it's at 36 and Old Seward right now.
Right, but they used to be at CN 36.
And our existing stop there is just a sign, so it'll be nice to have so close to the library. As I mentioned previously, with the Walmart East going in on Devar near Muldoon, we'll be constructing a bus pull-out and boarding facility there. And then another great project that the state DOT is working on will be the Muldoon Road Landscape Phase 3. That goes from 12th to Boundary. And it's doing landscaping, pedestrian, transit improvements. But it's really significant for transit because it will be making that entire corridor length fully ADA accessible, which is great. It's also making a protected pedestrian way. And then it'll also be providing LED illuminated bus stops, which really benefits our drivers and our riders. So it's really good for transit. Okay. And then I also did want to mention before moving on that all of these bus stop improvements that we're doing and our partners are helping us with have really come a long way and really helped out, because in 1996 only 20% of our bus stops were ADA compliant, and now in 2012 78% were. So together we've upgraded over 600 bus stops, and we're just continuing to make progress towards a more accessible system. And then I just wanted to go over a couple major transit activities going on in 2013. By the end of April, we're required by FTA to do our annual National Transit Database reporting. So as recipients of 5307 urbanized area formula funds, we're required to report on various data such as our financials and ridership, et cetera. And this NTD data is used nationally to apportion FTA funds to urbanized areas, and then the annual report submitted to Congress. So that's a really important federal requirement. It takes us months to compile all this data, and we're almost done with that, so that's great. The service change that I mentioned previously, we're proposing an effective date of July 29th. Again, we don't have a scope set at this point in time, but once we have a proposed schedule change, we'll be taking that out to the public for comment. and doing public outreach. And then lastly, we have our triennial review by FTA sometime this fall. And that's similar to like a certification review for an MPO. And it is to examine our performance and adherence to FTA policies and requirements. Essentially making sure that what we propose to do and commit to do that we're doing. They cover, I think it's 24 areas, but it's anything from procurement to maintenance to planning to Title VI to ITS. And again, well, it's to make sure that we're in compliance with FTA requirements. It's also a great opportunity to receive technical assistance and guidance from FTA so that we can improve our processes. So again, we don't have a date set on that, but we're anticipating late fall. And that was really all I had. You can see there's a lot going on in transit for 2013. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you have, or if you have comments on any of these priorities or changes. And if you want to contact me after the meeting, my contact information is up on the screen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think that's the end of our informational reports, unless there's any other committee comments. It's time to go to order. Anything else at this time?
The hordes are arriving in about 4.5 weeks.
I guess for the good of the, I guess, we'll have time from now. But May 4th is going to prove to be a really, 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 really busy day in the city, Saturday, May 4th, between the USS commissioning, the USS Anchorage commissioning, and some of the other events. There's some going on at Kincaid, but there's others going, I mean, I think I hear another radio ad or something else. There's something going on at the Egan Center that day that's a all-team thing that's one day only. I mean, May 4th, trying to find parking anywhere downtown and trying to drive anywhere, I probably would not suggest it. So.
I would say.
I'll hook you guys up with a bus pass.
Exactly, if you need one.
I have some parking spots in my driveway.
Yeah, it's May 4th is going to be very busy.
If you're a VIP, Stephanie, which I'm sure you are, you can park down at the railroad, but you got to go through Abe's.
Yeah. Yeah, to your point, you know, the ship is not coming on the 25th of April anymore.
Oh, it's not?
No.
So they won't be here for 12 days. They're only going to be here for 6. They're going to arrive on May the 1st.
Wow.
So all of those public access to see the ship activities that we could have put over a 12-day period are now going to jam into Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we're going to have monopolize a lot of buses for about 8 or 9 hours on each of those 3 days to get as much of the public down to the port to see the ship as possible. The 4th is the relatively easy one by comparison, even though we know it's going to be somewhere between 3,500 and 4,500 people down on the port for the ceremony. And Saturday and Sunday, then the rest of Saturday and Sunday, it kind of fizzles out, and they leave on Monday the 6th at 5 p.m., plus or minus a few, depending on the tides. So it's a shorter visit, but it's way more action-packed than it would have otherwise been.
Amphibious transport.
Oh, yes, and that also goes
Dock ship.
Right now, although I'm not sure if they're going to be adjusting them, right now the free dump days are scheduled for Saturday, April 27th and Saturday, May 4th. But they are only accepting trash from regular people out at the Highland Road location, not at the transfer station because of construction on the highway. So you cannot go to the old Seward location at 57th. On free dump day.
You can still go there if you want to pay.
You can still go there at other times, yes, but for free dump day, that will not be there. So May 4th is going to be a crazy day in my world. There's other ones that are coming up, but I can share those at other meetings.
And there'll be about 600 Marines running around town, so lock up your daughters.
All right, so the policy committee meeting is 2 weeks from today, and we will meet again on May 9th, which is my mother's birthday.
All right. Happy birthday, dear.